Marvel and DC, it seems to be an eternal argument like Apple versus Windows or PlayStation versus Xbox. Now, before I begin this video, I know that a lot of people watching may be fans of Marvel or DC. I would just like to state that I'm not being biased or influenced, as I'm not a fan of either. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like some of the movies, but I have no personal preference for either of the studios. Suicide Squad is, undoubtedly, a very important movie for DC. It comes at a very important time. The DC Extended Universe, or the DCEU, was created in 2013 as a rival to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Although films based on DC characters had previously existed, this was the first production company intrinsically and exclusively linked to the comic book company. From 2013 onwards, all DC movies became entirely in control of DC themselves. This is important to note, as films like The Dark Knight, currently both the highest grossing DC film and the most critically well received of the bunch, was an independent film based on a DC comic, rather than being a DCEU film. Since the DCEU was established, it has made 3 films: Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice, and now Suicide Squad. The DCEU is still in its infancy compared to its rival, the MCU, otherwise known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has currently produced 13 films from its own franchise. From its foundation in 2008, Marvel was keen to adopt a style to their films, which it replicates film on film. This is an action-comedy style of filmmaking, with memorable characters, light colours, minor threat, light comedy, and extensive marketing in areas like toy production. The DCEU was posed with a challenge, therefore. It did not have a blanket style of movies previously based on the DC comic range, but rather a spectrum. Christopher Nolan's brilliant film The Dark Knight is a completely different style of movie to the original Superman, or even a film with the same characters, Batman and Robin. This meant that the DCEU had to invent a style from the start. They went with a darker envisioning of the original comic book stories, with a more gritty interpretation compared with Marvel's light-hearted style. They began with Man of Steel, which was very averagely received by critics, picking up a rating of 55% from Rotten Tomatoes, and publicly slightly better received, picking up a 7.2 rating on IMDb. Batman vs Superman came next, and its ratings appeared lower than Man of Steel, 27% on Rotten Tomatoes, 6.9 IMDb. This was why Suicide Squad was so important. The opening of DC was distinctively average compared with that of the MCU, which opened with Iron Man in 2008, bringing in a 94% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and 7.9 by IMDb users. A quick side note, many say Rotten Tomatoes is somehow biased against DC movies, and that this is why they get low scores. It is important to note that Warner Brothers produced all 3 DC movies, funding them, and that Warner Brothers also owns Rotten Tomatoes. Why on earth would they be negatively biased against their own property? Moving on, this is why Suicide Squad was so important. DCEU had got off to a stunted start, and seeing Marvel start, this worried the studio. Suicide Squad needed to be loved by everyone. It wasn't. Suicide Squad picked up the lowest ratings of the bunch. It achieved a score of 26% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it wasn't critically well received. IMDb's voting system is based on users' ratings, thus anyone can vote on the film. The public were also against the film, with it currently standing at 6.8. This is surprisingly low, as when the critics reviewed the movie so badly, thousands of fans, who as of yet had not seen the movie, swamped IMDb obnoxiously with 10 out of 10 ratings. And yet, still post-release, the film fell to 6.8. So what does Suicide Squad mean for the DCEU? Truthfully, it means that they are on very thin ice. It was undoubtedly a failure for the studio. This was its 3rd strike, and the question is being asked, how many more movies will it take before the studio loses its credibility and public support? How many more can they really cope? One thing is for certain, DC are feeling the pressure. Marvel, on the other hand, is busy remaking the same movie over and over again, and it's still going brilliantly for them. Make of that what you will. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe. I will release a new film essay every week.